Forget Elon Musk. Forget Jeff Bezos. Forget every tech tycoon, oil baron, and industrial titan you've ever heard of. The richest person in all of human history had a fortune so vast it's still considered immeasurable today. His wealth wasn't in stocks or data or crypto. It was in pure, glittering gold. So much gold that on a whim he could single-handedly wreck the economy of an entire nation. And it would take that country years to recover. And the story of how this 14th century African king got his hands on that unimaginable wealth is one they almost certainly never taught you in school. This isn't just a story about money. It's a story that challenges our whole idea of world history, a story of a forgotten golden age, of an empire that sat at the very center of global trade, and of a ruler whose legacy wasn't just what he owned, but what he built. Who was this man, whose name has been whispered in legends for over 700 years? How did a king from West Africa, in an era often written off by the West as the Dark Ages, build a fortune that makes every modern billionaire look poor? To answer that, we have to go back in time, to a world buzzing with empires and trade, and to an epic journey that would forever put the kingdom of Mali on the map. His name was Mansa Musa, the 9th Mansa, or King of Kings, of the staggeringly wealthy Mali Empire. And his story is one of the most incredible in human history. It begins not on a throne of gold, but with a throne that was mysteriously abandoned, and a wild voyage into the unknown. To really get your head around Mansa Musa's world, you have to reset your image of the 14th century. This was not some primitive time. While Europe was struggling through the Middle Ages, dealing with famine and constant war, other parts of the world were thriving. The great Islamic Golden Age still cast a long, brilliant shadow of scientific and cultural achievement across North Africa and the Middle East. In the East, the successor states to the colossal Mongol Empire still dominated the vast trade routes of the Silk Road. And then there was Africa. Far from the simplistic image of an isolated continent, Africa was a vibrant tapestry of kingdoms and empires, connected by ancient and sophisticated trade networks. For centuries, the powerhouse of West Africa had been the Ghana Empire. But by the 13th century, Ghana's power was fading, creating a power vacuum. Into this void stepped a legendary figure, Sundiata Keita, the Lion King. His story, immortalized in an epic poem, tells of an exiled prince who came back to defeat a tyrant and unite the Mandinka peoples. Around the year 1235, he founded the Mali Empire, laying the groundwork for a new dynasty. Sundiata was a brilliant general and a clever ruler. He established the capital, Niani, and created a government that balanced his own authority with local traditions. The history and laws of this new empire weren't written in books, but were entrusted to a special class of oral historians called griots. These people were living libraries, memorizing genealogies, court histories, and laws, passing them down word for word through generations. It's thanks to the griots, and later the accounts of Arab scholars, that we know this history today. But the true engine of Mali's power was its location. The empire was perfectly positioned to control the trans-Saharan trade routes. You should imagine these routes not as dusty tracks, but as the superhighways of the medieval world. For centuries, huge caravans, sometimes with thousands of camels, would journey for months across the desert, linking the resources of West Africa with the markets of North Africa, Egypt, and beyond. From the south came the one thing the world craved above all else: gold. But flowing north was a resource that was, in this part of the world, considered just as precious: salt. In the blistering heat of the Sahel, salt wasn't just for flavor. It was essential for preserving food and for life itself. Miners in desert outposts like Tagaza would carve salt into massive slabs, which were then traded sometimes for their literal weight in gold. That was the core of West African commerce: gold for salt, salt for gold. But the trade was bigger than that. Ivory, cola nuts, and tragically enslaved people moved north while silks, ceramics, horses, and manufactured goods traveled south. The Mali Empire sat on top of these routes like a colossus, and its rulers knew that controlling this trade was the key to wealth we can barely imagine. This was the world Mansa Musa was born into, a complex, dynamic, and incredibly rich civilization, right on the brink of its golden age. Musa Keita Omri, who we now know as Mansa Musa, was never supposed to be king. His path to the throne was anything but ordinary, born from the strange ambition of the man who ruled before him, Mansa Abubakari Keita II. And now this part of the story is the stuff of legend, and it comes to us from a single incredible account that Musa himself later told to an Egyptian scholar. According to this tale, Abubakari II became obsessed with the Atlantic Ocean. He would stand on the coast of his empire and stare out at the water, fixated on one question: what's on the other side? For most in the medieval world, the ocean was the end of the map, a place of myths and monsters. But for Abubakari, it was a puzzle he had to solve, so the king did something absolutely radical. He ordered a massive fleet to be built. As the story goes, he equipped 200 ships with men, gold, water, and enough supplies for 2 years. His orders were simple: don't come back until you've reached the other side, or you run out of food and water. The fleet sailed out and vanished into the horizon. A long time passed. Then a single ship returned. The captain told a strange story of a powerful current, like a river in the middle of the ocean, that swept the other ships away, one by one, until they were all gone. Fearing he'd be next, he turned back. Abubakari listened, but instead of being deterred, he was inspired. He believed the story was proof that something was out there. He declared he would launch a second, even bigger expedition, and this time he would lead it himself. He commanded a new fleet to be built. Some versions of the tale say as many as 2,000 ships. In the year 1311, Mansa Abubakari II did the unthinkable for a king at the peak of his power. He abdicated the throne. He made his brother Musa the regent, telling him that if he didn't return, Musa should become the undisputed Mansa. Then he sailed west, trading immense power for a journey into the unknown. He was never seen again. And so, around the year 1312, because of this incredible disappearance, Musa Keita became Mansa Musa, the 9th king of kings of the Mali Empire. He inherited a stable and prosperous kingdom, but nobody could have guessed that this young, unexpected ruler would be the one to turn it into a legend. When Mansa Musa took the throne, he inherited the keys to a kingdom that was basically a wealth-generating machine. But Musa wasn't the kind of guy to just maintain things. He was an empire builder, and under his rule, the Mali Empire would reach its absolute peak of power and riches. The foundation of it all was gold. The Mali Empire controlled the main gold-producing regions of West Africa, including the legendary goldfields of Bambouk and Buri. This wasn't industrial mining. Much of the gold was alluvial, found in riverbeds, collected by panning and sifting. What made Mali so rich was the sheer quantity of it. Some estimates suggest that during Musa's reign, the empire may have accounted for nearly half of all the gold in the Old World, that is, Africa, Europe, and Asia. This gave him almost unthinkable control over the world's most valuable commodity. The Mansa had a clever rule: all solid gold nuggets belonged to him. Only gold dust could be traded by his people. This kept the biggest pieces in the royal treasury, while still letting a vibrant, taxable gold trade flourish. The second pillar was salt. From the scorching salt mines in the Saharan north, especially to Gaza, came the huge slabs of salt that were essential for life in the south. Controlling both the source of gold and the trade routes for salt gave Mansa Musa a dual monopoly on the region's most critical resources. But resources are only valuable if you can sell them. And this is where Musa's administrative genius really came into play. He understood that the real power came from controlling commerce. He taxed everything moving through his empire, every caravan that entered with fabrics and books, and every caravan that left with gold and ivory had to pay. The great cities of the empire, Timbuktu, Gao and Jenne, became booming commercial hubs, their markets filled with merchants from all over the known world, all adding to the king's treasury. Musa was also a conqueror. During his reign, the Mali Empire more than doubled in size, stretching for over 2,000 miles and covering parts of 9 modern-day countries. While the exact timelines are debated by historians, it's during this era that key cities like Timbuktu and the Kingdom of Gao were firmly brought under Mali's control. Each new territory meant more resources, more trade routes, and more people to tax. So, what are we talking about in terms of numbers? It's incredibly difficult to compare wealth across different eras, but modern estimates often place his fortune at the equivalent of $400 billion or even higher. But even that number doesn't quite capture it. Modern wealth is often tied up in fluctuating stocks. Mansa Musa's wealth was tangible. It was land, it was trade, and it was literal mountains of gold. His fortune was so great that people at the time just called it incomprehensible. Think about it. The richest people today might hit around $200 billion. Mansa Musa was at a bare minimum twice as wealthy as any of them. And unlike them, he wasn't just a rich guy. He was an absolute monarch. His personal wealth and the state's wealth were the same thing. He controlled a fortune no single person had ever had before or has ever had since. For the first 12 years of his reign, Mansa Musa focused on building his empire, and his incredible wealth remained mostly a regional secret. But in 1324, he decided to do something that would announce his name, his faith, and the power of his empire to the entire world. He would perform the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca. This was no ordinary pilgrimage. For a ruler like Musa, the Hajj was a religious duty, a geopolitical statement, a diplomatic mission, and the ultimate PR tour all rolled into one. The preparations took months, maybe even years. The logistics alone were mind-boggling. When the caravan finally set out, it was a city of gold on the move. The numbers recorded by historians who saw it are so wild they sound like a myth, yet they're consistently reported. The procession included 60,000 people. Mansa Musa rode at the front with his senior wife and her 500 attendants. This core group was followed by 12,000 of the king's personal servants, every single one dressed in fine Persian silk. An honor guard of 500 heralds marched ahead, each carrying a staff made of pure gold. And then there was the gold. Accounts claim the caravan had a train of at least 100 camels, each one carrying up to 300 pounds of pure gold dust. That's potentially 15 tons of gold, worth nearly $1 billion today. And that was just the spending money. The procession was so long that when the front of the caravan arrived at its resting place for the night, the back of it hadn't even left that morning's camp. It's said that every Friday, wherever he happened to be, Mansa Musa paid for a new mosque to be built. After months of crossing the Sahara, this unbelievable procession arrived in Cairo, one of the most powerful and cultured cities in the world. Its arrival sent shockwaves through the city. The Sultan of Egypt invited Musa to his palace, but a small diplomatic issue arose. Protocol demanded visitors kiss the ground before the Sultan. Musa refused, proudly saying he would only bow to God. Eventually, a compromise was reached, and the two great rulers met. It was in Cairo that Mansa Musa's legendary generosity went into overdrive. He stayed for 3 months and showered the city with gold. He gave it to the poor. He gave lavish gifts to the Sultan and his officials. He bought goods from merchants at ridiculous prices, not even asking what they cost. He gave away so much gold that he completely broke the Cairo economy. He single-handedly flooded the market with so much bullion that the value of gold plummeted, causing a currency crisis and massive inflation. According to some accounts, it took Cairo's gold market over a decade to fully recover from Mansa Musa's visit. Think about that. One man had so much money that he could, just by being generous on vacation, shatter the economy of a world power. It is maybe the single greatest display of personal wealth in history. Ironically, his generosity was so extreme that by the time he was ready to leave Cairo on his way home, he had actually run out of walking around money. He had to borrow from Egyptian merchants at high interest to finance his return journey. It shows another side of him, not just a lavish spender, but a man who understood credit and complex finance. The pilgrimage was a masterpiece. Mansa Musa had arrived in the heart of the Islamic world as an unknown ruler from a mythical land. He left as an absolute legend. If you're finding this story as incredible as I do, take a second to hit that like button. It tells the algorithm you want to see more history like this, and it's a huge help for the channel. Now, back to how Mansa Musa's journey forever changed not just the world's view of his empire, but the empire itself. The most important thing about Mansa Musa's epic pilgrimage wasn't the gold he gave away, but what he brought back. His journey was also a massive cultural and intellectual shopping spree. He returned to Mali with his mind full of new ideas and his caravan now full of the people who could make them a reality. Among the scholars and poets he recruited was a man who would change the look of his kingdom, Abu Ishaq al-Sahili. An architect and poet from Andalusia in Spain, al-Sahili was persuaded by Musa to come back to Mali. Together, they pioneered a new style of Sudano-Sahelian architecture. Al-Sahili was put to work designing magnificent new mosques in Gao and Timbuktu. The great Jingareba Mosque, a massive structure of earth and wood that still stands, was built under his direction. He also built a grand new palace for the Mansa using fired brick, a material that was new to the area. This building boom was part of a grander project, turning his cities into world-class centers of learning. With Mansa Musa's funding, Timbuktu blossomed into one of the great intellectual capitals of the age. He poured money into mosques, schools, and universities. The Sankor Madrasa, which already existed, was patronized and expanded under his reign into the fully fledged University of Sankor. It became a magnet for scholars from all over the Muslim world. They came to study law, theology, medicine, math, and astronomy. The book trade in Timbuktu soon became more profitable than almost any other business. This was Mansa Musa's most enduring legacy. He turned gold into knowledge, creating a beacon of scholarship in West Africa that completely shatters the old, tired idea of this period being a dark age. His genius wasn't just cultural. He was a skilled administrator who formalized the government, dividing the empire into provinces, each run by a governor loyal to him. This made the massive state more efficient. He also promoted Islamic law, or Sharia, in the cities, which made trade and diplomacy with the rest of the Muslim world much smoother. And finally, the Hajj had one last massive effect. It literally put Mali on the map. Before his journey, Europeans had a vague idea of a land of gold in West Africa. After his pilgrimage, the world knew its name was Mali, and its king was Mansa Musa. In 1375, the famous Catalan Atlas, one of the most important world maps of the Middle Ages, was made in Spain, and right there, in West Africa, is a drawing of a black king in a golden crown on a golden throne, holding up a giant nugget of gold. The caption reads, "This black lord is called Musa Meli. This king is the richest and most noble lord of all this region on account of the abundance of gold which is gathered in his land." For centuries, this image would define Europe's idea of West Africa, sparking a hunger to find the source of that wealth, a hunger that would help kickstart the age of exploration. Mansa Musa ruled for about 25 years, a period now remembered as the absolute peak of the Mali Empire. He died around 1337, leaving behind an empire that was bigger, richer, and more intellectually vibrant than ever. He was succeeded by his son, Magan I. But Magan didn't have his father's skill. The empire Musa had managed so expertly began to show cracks. Arguments over succession weakened the throne from within. Powerful states on the edges of the empire started breaking away. Over the next 2 centuries, the Mali Empire slowly fractured. The rise of the rival Songhai Empire to the east and the arrival of Portuguese ships on the coast rerouted the old trade networks and sped up Mali's decline. By the 16th century, the great empire had shrunk back to its original heartlands, its golden age now a memory. But a legacy is more than just territory on a map. The empire faded, but the echoes of Mansa Musa's reign never did. The mosques and universities he built endured. Timbuktu remained a vital center of Islamic learning for centuries, and the thousands of manuscripts created there are still being studied today, a testament to the intellectual world he funded. His story was passed down by the griots and written down by Arab historians. He became a legend, a symbol of a time when a West African empire was a global center of wealth and civilization. So, back to the big question. Who was the richest person in history? It wasn't a tech billionaire building rockets. It wasn't a Gilded Age industrialist. It was a 14th century African emperor, a man whose wealth was so absolute it was beyond calculation, so vast it could break foreign economies, so legendary it put his kingdom at the center of the medieval map. But to remember Mansa Musa only for his gold is to miss the point. His true legacy wasn't the gold he spent, but the culture and knowledge he built with it. He transformed his riches into learning, architecture, and faith that elevated his empire and shaped the history of a continent. The story of Mansa Musa is a powerful reminder that the title of richest in history belongs to a West African king, a fact that forces us to rethink our whole perception of the past and to recognize the forgotten golden ages from every corner of our world. If you love this video, like and subscribe.